Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I am absolutely delighted to welcome the lovely Margaret Soraya onto the podcast. Margaret is a landscape photographer based in the Scottish Highlands with a particular interest in photographing the ocean. We talk about the importance of creating photographs that come from your heart and soul, the incredible journey of returning to ourselves and following your intuition, as well as Margaret's deep connection to the sea and why she's just bought a house on the beautiful Isle of Harris. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Margaret Soraya. Margaret, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast this week. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. We've had the privilege of knowing each other now for a few years and we've done kind of a few different things together, and it's great to be able to speak with you again because you've had a few exciting life changes since I last saw you in November. You have just bought yourself a lovely house in Harris, which has been like your dream for so long. But before we kind of go down the route of talking about that and your journey towards this house move, I thought it'd be exciting for everybody who maybe hasn't heard of you before and your work, if you could go way back to the beginning and speak about what got you into photography in the first place.
Yeah, sure. It's funny, isn't it, when you tell your story and you tell it different every time. So we'll see where we go this time. But basically, I've always been creative. So I originally started, I used to paint a lot and draw a lot as a child. And then I went to university to study fine art. So I switched halfway through and did photography instead. So I ended up at university or college doing photography. And that really didn't go anywhere. It kind of stopped. I left again. I didn't finish the degree, and I left and I got distracted with life. So life took me off into this, into marriage and children and just working and just kind of, just getting through a lot of caring. And I think it's quite a common story, that, isn't it? We our real love, our passion we get diverted. So that was a sort of 10-year diversion, I would say. And once I got divorced, I came out the other end and thought, I've got to get back to myself somehow. Now, I had started up as a wedding photographer, but I wouldn't say that was the passion part, the creative part. That was a need to earn, and it was a great way of doing it. And I'm still actually shooting weddings today, so it's been successful. So I was photographing weddings when the boys were little, got divorced, and then it was like, hang on a minute, I've got to go and have life. Life's just opened up to me. What do I want to do? And for me, it was going back to doing the things that I loved when I was younger, and that is all around being by the coast, be it swimming, surfing, and taking my cameras in the water. So that's been a sort of gradual. It's been a gradual shift towards that throughout the time from that period. But after I found this sort of new life, I continued with my wedding photography. And then eventually I saw a time when I had enough space in my life to begin my true passion, which was the landscape photography. And I began Quiet Landscapes. So that was 5 years ago now. It took quite a while because I was obviously... I had children to look after by myself, so that's not an easy path. And there was battles along the way. So the time and the space didn't happen for such a long time. I started Quiet Landscapes in 2018, and I started running. The original idea was I called it photography retreats, and I'm thinking around that idea a little bit more because I kind of got a little bit. Again, I think diverted into more workshops, and I think we can easily do that. It's easy to let go of your original thought. I'm coming back to that now. So I'm having a great life now. It's just wonderful. I love it. Everything that I've ever wanted is coming together in terms of being outdoors and helping other people as well. Was that okay? Was that a good story?
That was beautiful. You're so humble about it now, because I remember listening to your story a while ago, and it's quite clear that you have been through a lot in your life, and you've had a lot of kind of obstacles to overcome as well. And now you are in this incredible position of doing what you love with, like you say, the landscape photography, the quiet landscapes. You've now got your incredible festival in the Highlands as well, bringing people out to the area that you love so much and bringing connection. But it has been quite a journey for you. And I remember when you were at college, university, I remember you talking in the past about having a tutor that was kind of really kind of not agreeing maybe with the kind of work you were producing, which for a while kind of deterred you, didn't it? I wonder if you could maybe go in a little bit to that, because I love it when people have been in some way deterred in the past, but they've overcome those kind of limiting beliefs of others or those criticisms of others to then go on to produce something that's really aligned with themselves. But it's such a long process and a journey. So yeah, maybe if you could delve into that a little bit deeper, because I think some people might find that quite interesting to hear.
Yes, I think it probably a lot of people relate to it actually, and it was basically during my university days when I briefly touched on that. I didn't finish the degree course, but it was I was just wasn't I wasn't very articulate. I was very quiet. So part of my my personality, I'm very introverted now. Obviously, as I've grown older, I've become more confident. So that's a different thing, confidence and introversion. There's a big difference there. But back then, when I was 19, 20 at university, I was an introvert and unconfident. Didn't have any self-assuredness about myself. But what I did have was an intuition, and that intuition was it was very free at that time, and it hadn't been exposed to any of these these critiques yet. And so I was going out with my camera into the water, and I was taking it out on my surfboard because I was just discovered surfing, which was just a brilliant time. And I would come back to the college, and it would be very much like, I suppose they would look at me as not the most studious person, although I was. That's the irony. I knew what I wanted to do, but they were seeing me as just kind of messing about on the water and turning up to college with a surfboard on my roof. It wasn't a great look. And then not being
That's
able
cool.
to explain what I was doing, because it is quite cool. But then I wouldn't be able to explain what I was doing. So I was under fire already from not being able to articulate things and not feeling confident in the work. And then the pivot point was when they asked us to produce a self-portrait, and I produced a landscape image, because that, to me, a portrait of yourself could be a landscape image, but I didn't have to say that at that time. It just kind of felt right. But they didn't feel it so much. And so there's these moments in time when you've put your heart into something and somebody shreds it apart in front of others. So like this adding public humiliation into the process of being told that you're not a very good photographer, it can be quite painful. And probably so painful that I thought, what's the point in this? So I did leave, and I did drop my photography for, I think it was a good 10 years at that point. Maybe not adding. Yeah, no, it could have been 10 years. And I think it's really important to understand that when anyone creates work of any sort, whether that's photography or art or poetry, it comes from you. It comes from your heart, doesn't it? So for somebody else to say that's not valid or that's not good, I don't think we've got the right to do that. I don't think anybody has the right to say that's not a good piece of art, because who says? So I feel very, very strongly as a result about how we critique. This word critique is the most awful word, I think, that's spoken of so frequently. There's positive encouragement, and there's obviously guiding people in the right direction and putting things together. But I don't think we can take one piece of one photograph and critique it. That's probably quite controversial, actually. But there we are. I believe that you need to look at it as a whole, and you have to look at what the person loves in their life, what they're doing, what's the meaning behind it, and what is it like as a collection. And then we can start to consider the ways in which they can develop. And that's a very different thing to shredding somebody because they didn't like that one piece that they produced. So So rounding that up, it took me a long time to get back to who I am now, and it was a process of understanding myself. So becoming self-aware, and that was years in the making to where I am now. Whereas somebody told me that they didn't like a piece of my work or it wasn't relevant, I don't really care. I really don't care anymore what anybody else thinks about it. So yeah, it's like night and day now.
Wow. Such a journey for you there in many ways. And you say kind of like the philosophy maybe around that and the critique element is quite controversial. But it's interesting because this is actually a theme that's coming up time and time again on the podcast that I've been doing so far with other photographers. It's this sense of being free to create more artistic images, this freedom to be creative and expressive, and not for us to judge other people's work, because as you say, it comes from somebody's heart, it kind of comes from somebody's soul. It's like their interpretation of something. And of course, when we begin photography, it's nice to learn the basics of exposure and composition and all of that. But once we've kind of got that, that's where the creativity starts, and that's where it comes from your heart and where you produce what you want to produce. And I love that you spoke there about intuition, because as you rightly said, it seems like when you were younger, you knew exactly where you wanted to be. You knew exactly what you wanted to photograph and exactly what landscapes and where you felt most at home. And as an introverted person, being in nature can be so healing. And it was clear that was 100% your passion. And then, as you say, these people's kind of thoughts and ideas and words kind of get in your head, and it deters us from continuing. And it is this huge journey and process of getting back to ourselves. And I personally have only really started, I'd say, in the last year and a half, starting to understand more about this intuition and following my gut instincts on something and actually producing work that is really speaking to me, and not constantly thinking about what do other people want me to produce and then limiting myself based on like rules and what's right and what's not right. But it is so difficult, and for some reason I find that photography, compared to other creative forms, seems to have so much more restrictions placed within it. I find, like with poetry, you can pretty much do anything. With painting, there's so many expressive forms, and the moment somebody kind of goes off with photography, it's kind of seen as wrong and not right, and then we get into competitions and judging. But I love it actually, because that narrative's definitely starting to change. And that was one thing that I really liked actually about your festival last year, was we were speaking a lot about that creative element, and you were very mindful about kind of the speakers you had there as well, because they were, implementing that open-mindedness and kind of getting us to think differently about photography. So it's clear that's definitely a part of your ethos and your work now, which is so, so beautiful.
Thank you. I'm just getting interrupted by my dog. I've just kind of gone off the flow there a little bit. But yes. Sorry about that.
The joys of pets.
She's just like she's just one. She's one, but she's still very hard work. Anyway, I think going on, with that, going back to that intuition thing, I think it's really important. It's the key. It's the key to producing work that is unique and that is your style, your own style. And as you said, there's a lot of rules in photography, and there's a lot of more so than any other art form. And you're absolutely right there, Kim. It's very, very interesting, that, isn't it? That why do we have so many rules? And maybe because it's a fairly technical process, I don't know. Whereas painting, it's much more free flow, isn't it? But I do think that we can still be intuitive in our photography, but we have to let go of all those voices and those opinions, and we have to get back to who we were basically as children. I know that might sound a little cliched, but when we were children, we were free, and we weren't thinking, oh well, if I make this painting, will somebody else like it? You're kind of just there making a mess. And it's great fun. So as we grow older, we come across these things that put barriers in.
Definitely. It's like just getting back to ourselves, like this process of just getting back. It's like relearning everything that we were born with, that other people have almost stripped us of and given us these different mindsets. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. And speaking there about going back to your childhood and kind of getting back to that, you know, the ocean and nature has always been or was a big part of your life when you were a child, wasn't it? And it's interesting now that this is kind of the journey you're now on, is getting back to that place. So what do you think it is about the ocean and being in and around the sea that speaks to you so deeply?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, this one, and it's something that took me so long to understand. And I didn't really understand it until I remember the time. It was when I was doing the exhibition with the Bosom Gallery, and I was writing all the words behind the work that I've been doing for quite a long time, so the Hebridean sort of seascapes. So I was basically starting that process of trying to think, well, what is it about my work? What I was writing a lot, and I think that's a really, really powerful thing to start to write and to start to understand the ideas and the concepts and what your beliefs are and what your loves are. I think it's really important, and that was what really helped me understand why I was always returning to the sea, because I grew up in Manchester. So I mean, you would think that maybe you go back to where you lived as a child, or where the area that you belonged to. But I was in city centre Manchester, and I didn't like it. I didn't like Manchester at all, and I was quite unhappy as a child, actually. So the thing that I suddenly realised was that every summer we went to Holland to my grandma's house, and she lived by the sea. And it was the most free and the most happy times that I experienced. That was a yearly trip. We would go to the beach every day, basically. So I sort of think that I formed that connection, that association with being happy and being free. And the coast became very important to me that way. So for other people it would be different. It would look like, well, as a child I was always playing in my garden and there was flowers everywhere and I loved the flowers, and you go back to those connections and those feelings, and I think it lives with you throughout your life, and they can be negative connections or positive connections, but usually the positive ones are the most successful when you're trying to create art from something that feels very deep rooted inside yourself. So yes, so that's where it started, and obviously that developed throughout my life as all I wanted to do was get away from Manchester, and I succeeded. Age 19, went to Swansea, and then I started living by the coast wherever I could.
It's beautiful. So where did your love for the Outer Hebrides and kind of Harris particularly start coming into your life?
Yeah, that's a really funny one, actually, Kim, because that's something that I'm exploring now, and it's actually going to be some sort of project that's en route. When you've got something that will happen one day, but it's got a time and a place, and it's not quite now, but it will be. Because basically I started going to the islands. I think it was Uist I started going to first when the boys were very, very small with my mum. My mum used to come and we'd go over on holiday because I lived in Ullapool. So I thought, well, we'll just get the ferry over and we'll go and explore these islands. I was just curious about them. And I loved it. It had that same sense of freedom that I had in Holland. And then I just started going over and over and over, and just it became like home for me for many years. I think I've probably got more friends over there than I have here. So I'm in Drumnajocket at the moment because, as we were saying, I have internet at the moment in Drumnajocket. I don't in Harris yet. So very, very unusual connections were happening quite early on, and I just felt completely at home straight away. But one of the things I'm exploring is that it's actually next door to me, I have an album from my grandma, who was Dutch, and she took a trip to the Outer Hebrides when she was, I think it was 1985, so I don't know what age she would have been. But she was very interested in the archaeology of the island, so she came and she did this trip, and she left a detailed record of the photographs, and even down to the people that she stayed with. She wrote it all out, and it's in a book, and it was given to me a few years ago, and I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder if that sort of seeped into me subconsciously when I was young, that I knew this, but because I don't remember knowing it. And I wonder if there's some sort of something to explore there, which would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
100%. It's interesting, isn't it, when we think about where our love and connection for a place comes from? Because, of course, if anybody's really familiar with your work, they'll know that the Outer Hebrides particularly is the place that features the most frequently and the most often in what you do. It's where you're most free. You can connect with it in every way you want, whether it's walking along the beach, swimming in the sea, doing your photography. Before you bought the house that you're currently getting ready to full-time live in, you were going over in your van and just staying there, like so often. And it just is so clear when you hear yourself speaking about it, and when you look at the content you're putting online, just how at home you feel there. And I find it really interesting that you say that, since you've kind of been starting going over there, you've been building these kind of incredible connections with people. It's almost like there's been something that's just pulling you over there. And it's really interesting because I'm experiencing something similar just now, although I am trying to return to Murray, where I'm from. I've lived in Aberdeenshire for the past 5 years, and still most weeks I'm back in Murray because I just know that I need to be there. And even though I've had this connection with it my whole life, it's like every few months I'm meeting new people there with new ideas, making new friends. And in Aberdeenshire, it's like it just doesn't have the same feeling, and it's like this process of moving back somewhere, but there's so many trials and tribulations along the way, and like obstacles that are put in your way, but you just feel in your soul this yearning to be somewhere, and you can't stay away from it. And it seems like Harris has been like that for you. It's like you've never been able to stay away from it, and now you have been able to buy a property there. So what was your kind of journey or process in deciding, right, do you know what, I'm gonna kind of bite the bullet here, I'm gonna invest in a property, and I'm gonna move over there full time? Because it has taken you kind of years to get to that stage, hasn't it?
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. So probably, I'm just trying to think how many years. Well, my boys are now 18 and 21, so probably about 14 years ago, I kind of, in my head, I'd already gone to live there. I was looking at, I remember it clearly because I actually put in to try and buy a piece of land back then, and they were obviously very small, but they were going through a process where they'd been shifted about already, and I didn't feel that I can move them at that point. Whether that was we never know whether that was a right decision or the wrong decision, but I think it was, and so even back then I knew that moving was right, but what I had to do was to prioritise the children. So I stayed on the mainland, and I always kind of knew that I would go at some point. It got a bit more complicated as I met my partner over here, and then obviously he didn't want to leave either. So there became a lot of reasons to stay for everybody else, apart from myself, which is, again, it's kind of a repeat sort of thing of where you're putting everybody else first. Because sometimes we just have to, there's no option. With the boys, we were moving quite a lot. We went from rented accommodation to rented accommodation because I lost my house during the divorce, and it was a fairly tough time, and I didn't really want to add to that to move over. Let's go and move over to ours, and also the finances, they just weren't there. So we have to be a little bit real with things, I suppose, and you're probably real with that as well. You've probably got those same things going on, haven't you? You've got people in your life and where you're living, and it's the reality of the situation for me was that it just wasn't possible. So I suppose what I did was my work became more and more island based, to the point where a few years ago I was actually working over there but just living here. So I was literally, all my work's on the Hebrides, and I was just coming back to, I don't know, pay the rent, pay the mortgage on the house here. But I needed to do that because the children were still in school. So it was just necessity, I suppose. And then suddenly last year, my youngest son, who I didn't think was going to leave home for a while, said, I'm moving to Glasgow. And I was like, oh my goodness, he's going. And the oldest one's already gone. He's at university already. So I was like, well, hang on a minute. This means, and there's been a bit of a boost in the housing market. So the house that I owned in Drumnajockey, I finally managed to buy that like only 5 years ago. And I thought, well, I'll just get it valued and we'll see, and we'll put it on. And if it reaches a X amount, it means that, well, it would be sensible to sell it now. And it's a 4-bedroomed, and I was running an Airbnb, so there's a lot to maintain. So I was looking at my life and going, my life is all chore. It's all chores. It's me cleaning the Airbnb so I can pay the mortgage on the big house that's got 4 bedrooms, so that the boys could have their their own rooms, and it's all for everybody else. And I'm spending all this energy, and all I really want to do is to go and create and be free and be in a place that I love and be by the sea. So what happened was that yes, the house sold, and it allowed me to buy in Harris, which most people said would be unachievable because it's also boomed in Harris. The prices have gone huge, and the bidding has gone ridiculous. So I did get outbid several times, and I kept going, and I found a lovely house in the Bays, which is not the popular area, but it is a very arty area, so I'm quite happy. That needs a lot of work and didn't look immediately attractive to people, should we say. And that's how I managed to do it. And I just kind of let go of everything. I cleared out the house. I don't have much left, and I haven't actually moved in yet. So my house is basically in my partner's shed at the moment, which is very small. And I'm delighted. I feel free. I feel free, and I feel like there's a new chapter in my life coming that's all about creativity and not about caring for everyone else.
Wow. It's like a whole new reset for you in so many ways. And even like clearing out your old house and getting rid of so much stuff as well. It's like energetically just freeing you to begin this new chapter in your life where, pretty much every day you're going to be completely immersed in both the scenery and the place and the creativity that you so much love. And yeah, it's great that you've managed to find somewhere, because I can totally imagine, like, trying to find somewhere to live right now, even if it's renting, never mind buying, is proving to be a huge challenge for a lot of people. And I think it's quite nice in some ways that your house does need some work done to it, because since you're a creative person, there's almost a lot you can maybe potentially do yourself to really do it up and make it that unique and arty and kind of speak to you, which is quite exciting. And I know you've began the process of redecorating certain parts of the house. So how are you finding that's going?
Oh, do you know what? I'm absolutely loving it. And what I realised was that I've never done this before. I've never had a home that I wanted to decorate, and that's really quite it's quite sad, I suppose, in some ways. My history is that I never. It's very, very hard to, sometimes very hard to say things, isn't it, really publicly? But I've lost a lot of homes due to a marriage that wasn't great and financial problems as a result of it, shall we say. So I was moving a lot, and I never had a house that I wanted to buy. We always had houses because we needed them, or we just needed to go there, or whatever it was. And it's been like it's been a life story for me. And this is the first house. The one in Drumnajockey, when I said I had a 4-bedroom house, it was lovely, and I'm not complaining about my life at all, because I'm grateful to be able to buy it. But I did it with help from my parents and from my partner as well, because as a self-employed person, it's very difficult to get any sort of mortgage, and once you're off that ladder, you're off it, so I'm not complaining about the house, but it was functional. It was kind of like, I never decorated it. I painted it white. It was all white, and it was a lovely little cottage, but it wasn't the house for me. So what I'm saying is that this house is my first house in some ways, and it's wonderful. It's like very emotional for me, actually. And I started going a bit wild with the decorating, thinking, well, I'd quite like to just to just do a few things that are really, really different. And I've never done this before, so I sort of caught myself out a little bit, and it's like I was planning each room. And because it's a 1930s house, it's got some really beautiful features, even though it's a bit damp. It needs a new roof. It's got no parking. There's a lot of issues there. It's a bit creaky and the electrics aren't great, but apart from that, I thought, well, actually, when you look at it, you remove all that and you think, well, that all can be fixed, Look at the features here. So I started doing some research, and I've got some really wild wallpaper. It's not wild, it's very sort of period wallpaper. And I'm just enjoying it. In fact, I've just taken a break. I've got I was in the house last week, and the chairs that were in there are obviously really old chairs. And so I thought I'll bring them home and I'll refurbish them. So I've just sanded them down and I'm painting them outside. So I'm putting a lot of work into it, but partly it's because I've got a little bit more time now, for the first time probably ever. I feel like I've got a little bit of space and a bit of a break. And I'm enjoying it, and I think it's going to be wonderful. I think this house is going to be amazing, and hopefully I'll share this journey on social media because people are really interested. I put a picture up of my terrible fireplace and said, what would you do with it? Had the most interaction out of any of my posts. So people are interested. So I'm just being really playful with it and really enjoying it. And then the plan is to build a studio in the garden. Things are going to change massively for me, so I'm building it like an open studio style kind of. I don't really know, just designing it just now. So people who are travelling down the road in the bays, you probably, if you know Harwich, you know that there's a lot of open studios where artists just basically let you into the house. So this won't be quite the same. It'll be in the garden, but it'll be an open studio, and I'll start painting as well. So there we are.
Wow. Oh, do you know, I just love the sound of everything that's going on for you just now. I mean, this is just going to open up, like you say, so many opportunities for you. And I think there is something really nice about getting a house that needs stuff done and that you can decorate and that you want to decorate and you want to do up. And it's amazing because for years I thought I wanted to live in a newish house that kind of didn't have any issues. But now that I've done that, I'm like, do you know what? Actually, no, I hate it. And I actually love the idea of buying an old property in the future that needs done up. And I think actually meeting Justine Ritchie last year at your festival and seeing what she's doing, for anyone that doesn't know, she basically has bought like this house that pretty much had nothing in it. It was completely falling apart right up a mountain that she's got to walk like goodness knows how many miles up to. And she's completely doing it up from scratch. It's incredible because you make it your own. It's a process, and you've then made your house, and then you can feel like it's your home. It's not somebody else's making. It's like you've designed it to be functional for you, and it works exactly for you. And I'm so excited to hear how you get on with this, because when you combine where you are moving to now, what you're doing with it, and all your passions, it's like I just can't imagine how happy and free you're going to feel when everything is settled. It's so exciting.
I know it's been quite a lot of work actually, because I got the keys to it during 6 weeks worth of workshop, so I wasn't able to do much with it. So it's been quite intense. Everything, the past year has been quite a year for me actually, and I was looking back on it thinking actually there's been a lot happen this year, and it's been quite a stressful year. And I think it's going to be once the move's kind of done, I just feel so happy now. I think it's just going to be amazing. And when you mentioned Justine Ritchie, actually, I was just about to say that my house it's very remote and it's very wild, but it's not as remote as Justine, so she can do it, But there is that element. There's that element of you've got to kind of get on with things when you're out there, I was just having to go and get my own coal and then drag it through the garden, and I'm thinking, this, you do have to just get on with things, and it's very kind of could be bleak for a lot of people, but for me it's just wonderful to be out there, and the wind's whipping and the sheep are wandering around the garden, and it's just great, minutes from the sea. So there we are.
I think for somebody who's creative and loves nature, it's like perfect. But in many ways, I think it's so nice for anybody to experience that, because it takes you back to basics and it reminds us really of where we've kind of come from. We have so many home comforts nowadays that in some ways is nice, but it's almost detrimental to our well-being sometimes. And when you are out there in nature and you're having to kind of fend for yourself in some ways and learn how to do stuff for yourself because you're living remotely and can't just phone somebody up, to come and fix things in an hour, it's amazing. And yeah, yeah, I'm just so excited for you, Margaret. It's amazing. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing this, because I feel like it might be inspiring for some people in some ways, because your story really shows that, life is full of ups and downs, and we all have very deep, difficult times. Everybody does at some point in their life, but you kind of give people hope in some ways that if you keep going and one day you will get through it, and the more you align with yourself and do the things you love, the more you almost attract into your life. And it's like that will be opportunities one day for people, when they just keep going to find that life that they've always kind of hoped for. And and for people that don't know as well, you've worked so hard on your business. You've got so many different elements to your photography business as well, and you're always seem to be working. I don't know how you do it, but you've worked so hard to get to where you are. And it's just such a positive, inspiring story, I think.
Oh, thank you. It's certainly I think that when we're talking about the house, it's more about what does it give you? What does that lifestyle give you? That it's brought me freedom almost. And moving over there, it's going to change the way that I create. And that's I'm prioritizing my creativity for the next part of my life, shall we say? We don't know what happens after that, but the next part of my life, the important thing for me is the freedom to create, and this is what it's brought me. And I think that that should be something that we see as successful, because I sort of feel that is where I've always wanted to be, in that space. And it's not because I've got a fancy house and loads of grounds and whatnot. It's successful for me because my life is going to be based around being outdoors, less stressful, being in nature and being creative, and that's just wonderful.
It's interesting to say that about, that's kind of like your version of success, because we've been kind of fed so much for years about what success means, but success to every person is something completely different. And for somebody like yourself, it is just living remotely with almost the basics, but completely surrounded by nature. It's a beautiful message to end on. Thank you so much, Margaret. For anybody that wants to maybe find out more about your work, or maybe follow along on your renovation projects on social media, where can they find you?
Instagram's probably Instagram, Margaret Soraya, and I do have a little YouTube channel and a podcast called Quiet Landscapes, and that's probably the best places.
Brilliant. There's loads of places to find you, and you've got plenty of services and everything as well, which people can check out too. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Margaret. I really appreciate your time today.
That was nice catching up, Kim. See you later.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. If you'd like to connect more deeply with the Photographic Connections community, feel free to head over to photographicconnections.com for full details. Now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.